The shock of age. If I told you that a 92-year-old woman could lower herself to the floor, press her body up 200 times, and then finish with 100 sit-ups, would you believe me? Most people would laugh, shake their heads, and say, "That's impossible. At that age, you should be sitting in a rocking chair." But here's the truth. Age does not always mean weakness. Age is not the number of candles on a cake, but the story of how you've treated your body along the way. And this woman's story begins not with strength, but with frailty. She was once like so many of my patients, her knees stiff, her back aching, her days punctuated by little sighs of discomfort. The world expected her to slow down, to fold herself into the gentle decline that comes with age. Doctors advised her to rest more. Friends told her to take it easy. It would have been the comfortable choice, the common choice. Yet she chose differently. She decided to fight back against the quiet erosion of time. She placed her palms on the floor, trembling at first, lowering her body just once, then twice. It wasn't easy, and it certainly wasn't graceful, but it was a beginning. And here is the shocking part. That beginning, repeated every morning, became a revolution. 1 push-up became 10. 10 became 50. And before long, she was breaking the very image of what 92 should look like. When I first saw her routine, I wasn't inspired by the numbers. I was inspired by the discipline. Anyone can be motivated for a week, maybe a month, but to show up every day for years, that is where the true miracle lies. So let me leave you with this thought. It is not your age that determines your strength, but the choices you make when the world expects you to stop trying. 2. The humble beginning. 10 years ago, she was not the figure of strength you now imagine. She walked with a limp, leaning on a cane for support. Her knees swelled in the winter, and her back often refused to straighten after a long day. In the doctor's office, she heard the same refrain countless older adults have heard. You need to slow down. Don't strain yourself. Rest is your best medicine. But rest became a prison. The less she moved, the weaker she felt. Chairs became traps, stairs became mountains, and even the walk from the bedroom to the kitchen became a chore. She was only in her early 80s then, but the weight of age seemed to settle over her like a heavy blanket. One morning, frustrated and weary, she looked in the mirror and asked herself a simple but daring question. What if I tried, just once more, to move differently? So she pushed the coffee table aside, laid down on the carpet, and pressed her palms against the floor. Her arms trembled, her chest barely lifted an inch, and she collapsed back down after a single attempt. But that one attempt lit a spark. The next day she tried again. 2 push-ups this time. By the end of the week, she managed 3. There was no applause, no cameras, no audience. Just an old woman defying the quiet pull of decline, one shaky movement at a time. And here lies the real lesson. Greatness rarely begins with glory. It begins in silence, with small, almost invisible victories that no one notices but you. For her, the cane that once felt like a necessity slowly gathered dust in the corner. Each push-up was not just a test of muscle, but a reclaiming of dignity, independence, and hope. So many of us wait for the perfect plan, the right trainer, or the latest equipment. But she proved the truth I have seen over decades of practice. Health in old age begins not with a program, but with a decision. A decision to try, today, not tomorrow. 3. The numbers that stun: 200 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, 50 minutes every morning, rain or shine. When people first hear those numbers, they shake their heads in disbelief. Some think it must be an exaggeration, a tall tale spun for the sake of inspiration. But I assure you, the numbers are real. I have seen them with my own eyes, and more importantly, I have seen the years of persistence that made them possible. The truth is, the spectacle isn't in the numbers themselves. Plenty of young men and women can perform impressive sets at the gym. What makes this extraordinary is the consistency. She has followed this routine not for a week, not for a month, but for nearly a decade. 10 winters and summers, 10 springs and falls, her body rising and lowering with the steady rhythm of a clock that refuses to stop ticking. It didn't happen overnight. At first, she celebrated reaching 10 push-ups without collapsing. Later, 50 became her new milestone. Then one morning she surprised herself with 75, and soon after, 100. Progress was not always linear. There were days she felt sore, days when the old aches returned, days when she considered stopping, but the next morning, there she was again, on the floor, palms pressed against the carpet, counting softly to herself. What impresses me most is not her strength, but her discipline. Muscles grow and fade. Endurance rises and falls, but discipline is the true muscle of longevity, and hers is stronger than any bicep or abdomen. Her neighbors, once skeptical, began to notice her vitality. They saw her carrying groceries with ease, tending her garden with energy, walking without fatigue. They whispered in admiration, "She's 92, and look at her go." So, when I speak of her 200 push-ups and 100 sit-ups, I am not reciting statistics. I am pointing to proof that the body, when guided by relentless will, can defy the quiet script of decline that most of us accept too easily. The lesson is simple. Strength at 92 is not built in a day. It is built in thousands of days, each one chosen with purpose. 4. The hidden struggles. It is tempting to look only at the glory, the impressive numbers, the admiration of neighbors, the awe of strangers who hear her story. But to tell only that side would be dishonest. Behind every triumph lies a trail of pain, doubt, and quiet struggle. There were mornings when her body ached so badly that she sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the floor, wondering if she had the strength to continue. Her wrists throbbed from the pressure of push-ups. Her lower back, weakened by age, sometimes flared with sharp reminders of fragility. And then there were the falls. Once, during a particularly determined set, her arms gave way, and she collapsed flat against the carpet, breath knocked out of her. Another time, she strained a shoulder so badly that lifting her teacup later in the day felt impossible. The physical pain was only half the battle. The other half came from voices, well-meaning but discouraging. Friends told her she was foolish to push herself so hard. Family members worried aloud that she might break a bone. Even her doctor raised an eyebrow, cautioning her to be realistic. But here is where her true strength revealed itself. She did not deny the pain. She did not dismiss the warnings. Instead, she listened, adapted, and pressed forward with even greater determination. On days when push-ups felt impossible, she did stretches. When her shoulder demanded rest, she focused on breathing exercises and core work. She never allowed setbacks to become endings. The hidden truth about longevity is this. Resilience is not the absence of struggle, but the ability to rise again after each stumble. Every scar, every sore muscle, every skeptical remark became fuel. They reminded her that her journey was not supposed to be easy. And in those quiet battles, she forged not just physical strength, but an indomitable spirit, one that no fall, no ache, no doubt could erase. So remember this, what you admire in her today was built not in moments of ease, but in the crucible of hardship. 5. When the world took notice. For years, her routine was a private matter, just an old woman, a carpet, and the steady rhythm of her breath. There were no spectators, no applause, only discipline, quietly lived out in the early hours of morning. But one day, her granddaughter, visiting from college, pulled out a phone. She recorded a short clip, barely a minute long, of her grandmother lowering into push-ups with surprising grace and rising again without pause. She posted it online, thinking it might amuse a few friends. By nightfall, thousands had watched. By the end of the week, millions had. Comments poured in. "I can't do 10 at my age, and she's 92. This is the motivation I needed. No excuses anymore." The world, it seemed, could not get enough of her story. News outlets called. Fitness bloggers wrote about her. Strangers stopped her in the grocery store, their eyes shining with recognition. But here is what struck me most. She didn't care about the fame. She never once asked how many views the video had. What mattered to her were the quiet, personal messages that arrived from people she had never met. A man in his 50s wrote, "Because of you, I've started walking again." A young mother confessed, "You gave me hope after my surgery." A teenager admitted, "I thought my grandmother was fragile until I saw you. Now I want to help her get stronger." She would smile at these words, fold the letters neatly, and place them in a little wooden box by her bedside. To her, they were treasures, far more valuable than headlines or fleeting internet fame. The lesson here is clear. Strength is not measured only in muscles or numbers, but in the impact it has on others. Her push-ups became more than exercise. They became a message, a challenge, a spark. And so, what began in silence had now become a chorus reminding us all that resilience is contagious and that one person's discipline can awaken a community to the possibilities of aging well. 6. The doctor's surprise. When the headlines faded and the online buzz quieted down, life returned to its steady rhythm. But one part of her story still astonished people the most. Not what she could do on the floor of her living room, but what doctors found inside her body. She went in for her annual checkup, the kind most seniors dread. Blood work, scans, heart tests. The nurses expected the usual numbers for someone her age. High blood pressure, brittle bones, maybe early signs of frailty. Instead, her results told a different story. Her heart was strong, beating with the rhythm of a woman decades younger. Her bone density, far from fragile, was stable and firm. Her blood pressure, normal. Her cholesterol, balanced. Even her lung capacity surprised the specialists. The doctor, a man who had practiced medicine for over 30 years, leaned back in his chair and shook his head. "At 92, he said slowly, "these numbers are unheard of." She only smiled, her hands folded calmly in her lap. She had no miracle pill, no secret supplement. What she had was consistency. 10 years of moving her body every morning, 10 years of refusing to let age dictate her limits. I've met many people who chalk health up to luck, as if some are simply destined to be strong while others are not. But her story proves otherwise. Yes, genetics play a role, but discipline, movement, and attitude carry far greater weight. She was not given strength. She built it, rep by rep, day by day. What startled her doctors most was not that she had avoided decline, but that she had reversed it. Her bones, once thinning, had stabilized. Her muscles, once weak, had grown. In every measurable way, she was younger at 92 than she had been at 82. And so the lesson deepens. Health in old age is not only about avoiding disease, it is about creating vitality. And vitality, unlike youth, is not given. It is earned. 7. The legacy of strength. In the end, her story is not just about push-ups or sit-ups. It is about rewriting the narrative of aging. For too long, we have treated growing old as a slow surrender, a time to shrink back, to accept decline as inevitable. She refused that script. At 92, she stood as living proof that age can be met with defiance, not resignation. Her body was not perfect. She still carried aches, still had days of fatigue, still knew the weight of her years, but she carried them differently, on her terms, with dignity and with fire. What she taught us is simple yet profound. Longevity is not merely about adding years to life, but adding life to those years. A rocking chair has its place, yes. Rest is valuable, yes, but rest without movement becomes rust. And she chose not to rust. Neighbors who once saw her as fragile now see her as a beacon. Strangers who stumbled upon her story online have written to say their lives are changed. Even her doctor admits that she has reshaped his view of what is possible for his older patients. But perhaps the most powerful part of her legacy is not in numbers or medical charts. It is in the mindset she leaves behind, that every day, no matter your age, you have a choice. A choice to rise, to move, to strengthen what remains instead of mourning what is lost. She often says with a twinkle in her eye, "I'm not training to live forever. I'm training to live today." And that, my friends, is the real secret. So, when you hear her story, don't just marvel. Act, move. Bend your knees, press your palms to the floor, and begin your own small evolution. Because her legacy is not hers alone. It is an invitation to us all. The question is no longer, can a 92-year-old do 200 push-ups? The real question is, what excuse do the rest of us have?